불확실성의 시대. 혁신과 차별화에 성공한 조직이 21세기를 주도할 것이다. 경영 전략의 대가 마이클 포터 하버드대 교수, 정의란 무엇인가의 저자 마이클 샌델 하버드대 교수, 디지털 비즈니스 권위자 돈 헵스콧 회장. 세계적 경영 사상가들이 제시하는 창조 경제에서의 새로운 차별화 전략과 가치 창출 해법. 동아 비즈니스 포럼 2014 지금 시작합니다. 동아 비즈니스 포럼 2011에서 CSV 개념을 설파한 마이클 포터 교수. 국내 우수의 기업은 CSV를 실현하며 기업의 경쟁력 향상을 위한 새로운 기회로 인식되어 가고 있다. 이제 CSV는 기업의 꿈이 아니라 현실이 됐다.
As an enormously powerful vehicle to amplify and drive that.
경제 성장과 사회 문제 해결을 동시에 추구하며 새로운 기업의 성장 동력으로 떠오르고 있는 CSV. 마이클 포터 교수가 전하는 새로운 경쟁 우위와 CSV.
Well, good morning, everybody. Now, it's interesting that this year's focus in this forum is on innovation and differentiation and creativity. But what I'd like to stress to all of you today is probably the biggest single opportunity for creative thinking and innovation and differentiation is coming not from the conventional concepts of marketing and product development that we've been all studying for so many years, but ultimately it's coming from the fusion between business and society. So the idea of shared value really starts by trying to understand the relationship between a company and society. One of the unique things about the time we live in today is our awareness of a tremendous range of social issues. Now, traditionally, again, that's not been the focus of business. Business worries about the economy. It worries about kind of the economic side. The social side is somebody else's job. But I think what we're coming to understand is that old model doesn't work. We're not making progress fast enough on all these social issues. And it's this ability to rethink the relationship between business and society that I think is the biggest opportunity for innovation we see in the world today. The traditional way that businesses have connected with society was through philanthropy. You ran the business made money, and it took some of the money from the business and gave it to support social needs. But I think what businesses came to understand is that the philanthropy, as important as it could be, ultimately didn't make much impact. Yes, the company could give money. Yes, you could volunteer, give your time. But ultimately, that often didn't lead to a big impact. It also didn't address the concerns about business that have been growing in the population, in the average citizens. But to move beyond giving and say we have to look more broadly at how we engage society as a corporation. And the kind of next stage was what's commonly called corporate social responsibility, CSR. CSR is more than just giving. It's about compliance, ethical behavior, following the law, following the spirit of law, behaving responsibly. It's about being a good citizen in the community in which you operate, or the communities in which you operate, participating, being helpful. Corporate social responsibility was a great step forward. I think it's raised the standard of behavior in many companies. But unfortunately, it's only a next step. It's not a solution. Why? Because corporate social responsibility is basically about reducing harm, not about creating value. And that's where the idea of shared value comes in. Social responsibility is about reducing harm, being a good citizen. Corporate shared value is about creating social value through the business. With the products of the business, with the way the business operates, creating social benefit and economic benefit together. Then we have the opportunity to scale and to create solutions, not just nice projects. This is the opportunity of shared value. Now, why is this possibility suddenly appeared? Well, it actually hasn't suddenly appeared. It's been there all along, but we haven't been able to see it. Why? Because too many of us in business thought of ourselves as too narrowly meeting economic needs. And if we can find how our particular business can tap into that crucial, huge societal need, all of a sudden we open up a lot of new territory. Here are a couple of kind of critical ideas that I think most businesses overlooked. If you can't hire people that are skilled, this is not only bad for the community because people can't get good jobs, but it's also bad for you because you can't hire who you need, the kind of employees you need. If there's poor health in the community, this not only affects the community, it also affects the business in terms of the ability to retain employees and have employees be productive. What we found is that there's no separation between social needs and business. The two are connected, but we overlook that. Shared value can be created in three ways. One is with your product. Whatever your product is, whatever the business you're in, your product can actually often meet social needs. That's step number one. Step number two, you can create shared value in how you operate your value chain. Shared value emerges from there as well. And then at level 3 of shared value is the ability to, by improving the surrounding environment in the communities in which you operate, you can actually make yourself more productive. Here's a company that's seeing their infrastructure, their telecom infrastructure, their internet infrastructure, as not just traditional telecom infrastructure, but as a tool for bringing many social services and public services to remote areas. Whole new idea about what the industry and what the company does. Opening up giant new markets that have not traditionally been even thought about in the telecom business, because their job was just to, provide infrastructure to make phone calls and, do internet, rather than connect with society. Marvelous example, right here from Korea. From Korea, of a company that, basically they make cars. And they distribute cars. And they have dealers all around the world. And that was what they did. That was what every car company did. But when they started thinking more broadly about the effect that they can have on societies in which they're operating, they started realizing that actually there was a weakness in the communities in which they wanted to sell cars that would actually constrain their ability to grow. And this Dream Center program was created. It started in Ghana. Now it's spreading to a number of other countries to actually, the auto company is out there training local citizens in how to repair cars. And all of a sudden, people who had no real economic future all of a sudden have a future and have a great job and are earning a better income. And that's starting to build a infrastructure in the community that's really synergistic to the really growth of this company as it tries to build its business. This is the kind of thing companies didn't think about until they started asking themselves, how can we create shared value? With shared value, we find increasingly businesses have to start partnering with government and NGOs because those actors can provide crucial skills and resources necessary for making shared value strategies work. And here's just some examples of the kind of partnerships we're starting to see. You're going to see actually a major business working collaboratively with government entities on initiatives that actually are exciting growth opportunities for the business, but they wouldn't be possible without government doing its job right, providing the necessary infrastructure, improving the rules or regulations. Government and business often are now going to be working much more together, I think. It's been... And finally, I want to just go back to my earlier slide. You know, traditionally there's been the philanthropy, CSR, and CSV. Those have been three separate things. But the best companies at shared value are not only creating shared value business models, but they're amplifying and improving their success by also harnessing their philanthropic effort and their CSR in a consistent way. The companies that are often the most differentiated and the most innovative have created this fusion. We're starting to see that the best companies today are really redefining their purpose, their vision statement, their mission statement. So Nestle used to call itself a food and beverage company. They don't call themselves that anymore. That's kind of the old way of thinking about who they are. The new way of thinking about Nestle is they're a nutrition, health, and wellness company. Think of the difference between the left and the right. If you think of yourself as a food company, what does that open up in terms of opportunity? Well, you have to find ways of getting people to buy more of your food, so how do you do that? If you think of yourself as a nutrition and health and wellness company, all of a sudden, many new opportunities open up for differentiation. And I think, although there's a lot of movement in the shared value direction, we can move even faster if we can actually rethink our purpose. Why does this company exist? What fundamental need is it really trying to meet? That we are in a period now where the whole concept of business is beginning to change. I think it's coming from within businesses. I think it's coming from the young people. But this is actually where the real innovation and growth is going to come from. You know, how to innovate faster. But I simply offer shared value as an enormously powerful vehicle to amplify and drive that spirit and that innovation. And I think Korea is a hotbed. Thank you very much, and thank you so much for this wonderful, exciting day. Thank you.
네, 기조 강연을 통해 귀한 메시지 주신 마이클 포터 교수님께 감사드립니다.
고객의 의견을 경청하는 것을 넘어서 고객과 함께 혁신하라. 똑똑한 개인이 정보와 지식을 독점하던 과거의 방식은 더 이상 효율적이지 못하다. 기업은 지식 공유와 협업을 통해 경쟁력을 확보해야 한다. 상품 대신 경험을 팔아야 한다. 디지털 시대 살아남는 기업의 생존 전략은 무엇인가?
That if we come together and bring our legitimate aspirations to the table all around the world, and if we think of a new role for business, then this new age can be one where the promise is fulfilled.
디지털 비즈니스 권위자 돈 탭스콧 회장이 전하는 디지털 시대의 차별화 전략.
Thank you very much. Good morning. What I'd like to do now is to narrow down on the question of the digital revolution and its impact on differentiation. That we're really at a turning point in human history where the industrial age and industrial capitalism as we've known it has run its course. And now if you look around today, you'll see a set of institutions that are in various stages of being stalled or frozen or in atrophy, contrasted with the sparkling initiatives of a new model on how these institutions could be done differently. And maybe the purpose of information is not to give us comfort or inform us, but it's just to make us feel good. So these are huge changes that are underway. Now, what does this mean for business and for competing in business? Well, one thing it means is that a number of drivers are enabling a new set of business models that enable differentiated value to be created in the market. Now, the first is a technology revolution. We have the rise of the social web. We have the rise of big data. This is a new asset class. We have the Internet of Things, 1 trillion inert objects in our world that are becoming smart communicating devices. So, pervasive ambience computing. The physical world is becoming smart. We see the rise of the cloud. Think of the Internet as a big computer. You are programming this machine that we're all creating, and that enables us to collaborate. So this is a new paradigm in technology. Now, a second big set of changes are the rise of the first generation to come of age in the digital age. I started studying children 20 years ago when I noticed how my own children were effortlessly able to use all this sophisticated technology. And at first I thought my children are geniuses. 11,000 young people in 10 countries. And I've come to the conclusion that this is the most important force to change the world. A new generation of digital natives. And this is the first time in human history when young people can help show us the way forward. Now, the third big set of changes have to do with the social revolution. Single mothers for daycare for Obama community. He created a platform whereby 35,000 communities self-organized, and that's what brought him to power. Self-organization is now a powerful force, and everyone increasingly can participate in the economy. The final set of changes are economic changes. And they have to do with the nature of the corporation. Now, Cisco understood this. My little poem for them was, focus on what you do best, partner to do the rest. You focus on what you do best, and you partner on a network to do the rest. Cisco's business model conferred competitive differentiation to them. Do you know the idea of a burning platform? That you're somewhere where the costs of staying where you are become greater than the costs of moving to something different. You're on an oil rig, it's on fire. You need to move to something new. And increasingly, globally, businesses today have a burning platform. Tinkering is not sufficient. We need to make fundamental changes to our business models. Every one of these business models is enabling companies to differentiate through technology. How could your company use these business models? Well, the first is what we call digital conglomerates. This is a new species of business. Google would be an example. Well, Google is mainly an advertising agency, but Google is also in the financial services industry. It's a media company. It's a manufacturing company building devices. I think Google may well dominate the auto industry because it has the best technology for the next generation of automobiles, which is autonomous vehicles. A second type of business is what we call data frackers. Now, fracking is a new word in the oil and gas industry that push steam, if you like, into massive sets of data and create new opportunities. So Facebook would be a great example. Facebook is building up a treasure of data that may become the most valuable asset in all of human history and the greatest wealth of any corporation ever created. Thirdly, we have a new class of service aggregators. Now, this is sometimes called the sharing economy. Buzzcar is aggregating a whole bunch of automobiles together, excess capacity, so that you can go and get into someone else's car and drive away. Are very different than traditional corporations that are vertically integrated, but they provide not just the same functionality, they provide a differentiated functionality, and they're competing beautifully. Now, the next is what we call the peer pioneers. These are companies exploiting peer production. So when Linux first came out, most of the computer companies fought against it. Well, IBM originally had the same reaction. IBM gave away $400 million to Linux, and in doing so, they created a platform upon which they built a multi-billion-dollar hardware and services industry, and they were able to keep Microsoft out of the high-end enterprise market. They differentiated by sharing. They also were able to save themselves $900 million a year developing their own proprietary operating system. Number 5, Ideagoras. But an agora is a marketplace. Ideagoras are marketplaces for uniquely qualified minds. It's companies like Inno360, where you build your own innovative ecosystem. You're trying to develop a hydrogen engine. You're trying to create a set of molecules that will clean a product differently. You bring together all of the best people in the world in that ecosystem. Number 6 is prosumers, turning consumers into producers. Companies tell me, Don, we're focused on our customers. Threadless is a clothing company where all of its products are designed by its customers. Doritos asked its customers to create its Super Bowl ads. It's the largest television program in the world after the World Cup final. I'm going to play you a couple of these ads. This was an ad created by a couple of young women who were nobody. Now they're somebodies because their ad ran on the Super Bowl. You open up your business to become a platform enabling you to differentiate. This began with Amazon, who opened up its APIs. If you're a small company in Korea, you can use Amazon for marketing, e-commerce, distribution, inventory, payment systems, and differentiated it from all of the other booksellers. Theme number 9 is the re-intermediaries. You know the term disintermediation? If you're in the middle in the digital age, you need to create new value, or else you'll be wiped out. So there's a new generation of industrial-strength social media for the enterprise. We've got companies like Jive that are the market leaders. Stop using email and move to the next generation of internal collaborative platforms. So, those are 10 new business models, and thank you for being patient. Every one of those is causing convulsion in their industry and it's enabling companies to differentiate, which is the basis for competitive advantage. Let me close. This is a new paradigm in differentiation. This is a new age. It's an age of networked intelligence that if we come together and bring our legitimate aspirations to the table all around the world, and if we think of a new role for business, then this new age can be one where the promise is fulfilled. Starlings over the moors of England come in something called a murmuration. The murmuration has a function. It warms the birds up for the cold night ahead, and it protects the birds. In some of these videos, you can see on the right here is a hawk, a fierce predator, being chased away by the collective power of the little birds. Well, it turns out that this murmuration functions according to the principles that I've described to you today. It's a big collaboration. There's an openness. The birds are naked. There's a sharing of all kinds of information about trajectory, danger, food sources, location. Just like I opened by saying business can't succeed in a world that's failing, imagine if we could, that we could connect ourselves on this planet with a vast network of glass and air. Could we start to go beyond sharing information? Could we start to share our intelligence? Could we create some kind of collective intelligence or consciousness that transcends beyond an individual to a company, to a community, to a society? If we could do that, we could solve some big problems in the world. Just like if this murmuration breaks up, those predators can have their prey. So, I look at this, and I get a lot of hope that maybe this smaller world our children inherit might actually be a better one. And this age of networked intelligence might be an age where the promise is fulfilled. Thank you very much.
캡스코 대표님의 유익한 강연 감사합니다.
정치 철학의 제왕과 경영학의 대가가 1년 만에 맞대결을 펼친다. 정의란 무엇인가의 저자 마이클 샌델, 공유가치 창출의 창시자 마이클 포터. 그들이 말하는 자본주의 위기의 원인은 무엇인가? 또 기업과 정부는 사회적 문제를 해결하기 위해 어떤 역할을 해야 하는가?
Capitalism as a system is almost magical. All kinds of amazing things to happen. It allows you to hire people and give them jobs.
Capitalism cannot by itself create a just society or a good society. Does greater GDP mean greater happiness and well-being?
철학 제왕 대 경영 대가의 한치의 양보 없이 치열한 논쟁. 세기의 토론. 자본주의의 문제점을 치유할 대안은 무엇인가? 지금 시작합니다.
I have to say good morning still. We have 30 minutes left. And today we have a very important and interesting session, debate of the century. Michael versus Michael. Well, I have a series of questions, and I hope you respond, and then have debate. The first question, or the issue, is what is the power of capitalism? I believe that capitalism has been in existence in our world from 1776, so we have the history of 230 years of capitalism, which has been going through ups and downs. But the reason why capitalism has been in existence, overcoming challenges of communism and other ideologies, is because of its inherent power. So let us start with this. Will you start, please?
Is almost magical. The fundamental nature of capitalism is that you discover a need that needs to be met, a product or service or something, and you discover it, and you invent a way of meeting that need. So at its core, capitalism has enormous power that other systems haven't. That said, and I think capitalism won against socialism. If you look back, it wasn't very long ago. But we're in a situation right now where I think we have some profound problems with capitalism. And Korea is a good example. We have a capitalist economy here. At some level, Korea is very successful, driven by capitalism. But at the same time, a lot of Koreans today are not necessarily doing well. And there's a gap. In the year 2014, in many countries of the world, we kind of know capitalism is a very powerful system for meeting needs and doing it efficiently, but something's going wrong. And I think hopefully today we'll talk about what
Yes.
that is.
Michael, do you think you can remedy the problem inherent in this capitalism?
Well, I would begin first by saying I'm delighted to be a part of this panel. It's an honor to be here. The answer I would give to your first question is that capitalism is the greatest mechanism the world has ever known for producing abundance and prosperity, material abundance and prosperity, and economic growth. And yet, for all its power, for all its magic, as Michael says, rightly, capitalism cannot by itself create a just society or a good society for a few reasons. First is that Korea today, having achieved tremendous economic success and economic growth and GDP, at a certain point of economic development, does greater GDP mean greater happiness and well-being? Or are there values beyond material abundance, at least after a certain level of development, that matter and that capitalism by itself can't provide? I think people are asking that question partly because the magic of capitalism often also comes at a cost, and that cost is inequality, a growing gap between rich and poor.
The first Nobel laureate in economics was Tim Berners, Dutch economist, who said that for multiple objectives, you need multiple means to solve or to catch. So the question indeed seems to be whether economics or capitalism can pursue two divergent objectives at the same time, whether there are other ways to complement or to substitute. How can you solve this problem?
Well, I just want to make the point that the challenge of harmonizing capitalism with a fair and just society, I think the challenge has increased significantly over the last 10 or 20 years. That is the phenomenon of globalization, where I think historically, an American company saw itself as an American company. And this notion of globalization, eliminated work opportunities, and the work that remains requires more skill if that work is going to pay a good wage. And so all over the world we're seeing that the skilled people are doing well. Capitalism is great for them, but it's the people that don't have computer science training or sophisticated skill levels. Those are the people that are not finding work at a good wage anymore. And so I think that I'm not defending capitalism here at all. I'm just saying that there's something about the changing context in which capitalism is taking place that I think has sort of exacerbated this inherent challenge, perhaps, and the question that I think Michael is posing and is a very profound question, because we're really in new ground here. We're in new territory. But I think the challenges of capitalism, I think, have been exacerbated by some circumstantial shifts in the nature of work, in the nature of skill requirements, and in the kind of geographic scope of competition, and the bringing of so many new people into the global workforce. Young people all over the world are having trouble getting jobs. And businesses are kind of struggling as well, because they think they're doing what they're supposed to do, which is to improve their profitability and be efficient and be productive and compete in the global marketplace. But ultimately, the consequences that now has for the communities in which they're based and operating is increasingly unacceptable. And so I think the challenge of capitalism in this environment, I think, is much perhaps greater than it has been historically.
And that capitalism coupled with divergent contexts such as globalization is damaging or negatively affecting
and the nature of work and the nature of skill and the requirement of being a well-paid worker.
And immobile in their movement. And do you think this problem can be solved by other means such as justice in society?
I think we can't address these problems without taking up questions of justice and fairness, not only within companies, but as democratic citizens. Let me give a few concrete examples. We know that there is a growing gap between rich and poor. It's true in Korea, it's true in the US, it's true in most countries around the world. We know that the top 10%, the top 1%, control a very large share of income and wealth. In the US, over a third of the wealth is controlled by the top 1%, and the bottom 50% of the population owns around 1% of the wealth, virtually nothing. Youth unemployment, which Michael mentioned, is very high in Korea. The number of workers who are so-called irregular workers, who make 50 or 60% of what regular workers make, who have fewer benefits, is high and growing. And beyond the question of fairness is the question, what training are companies investing in workers who may be temporary or irregular? I read that in the aftermath of the Seoul ferry tragedy, where over 300 people died, that a large portion of the crew, 19 out of 33 I read, including the captain, were irregular workers, which raises the question, what kind of training did they have to deal with an emergency? So these questions of inequality are partly questions of fairness, but they're also questions about the common good, about the quality of training that companies are giving. Another aspect of inequality, how do we care for our elderly who are no longer in the workforce? According to some accounts, 45% of elderly people in Korea live below the poverty line. This is a challenge. And what about small and medium-sized enterprises? The issue of fairness arises there. What opportunities do they have in an economy where big companies have succeeded in part because they have been the engine of this tremendous economic miracle? And that's a great achievement. And yet there is a question of fairness and balance. But I am struck and impressed by the debate in Korea today about economic democracy and fairness. And it reminds me of that stage in American capitalism 100 years ago.
Well, it seems that both of you agree on the shortcomings of democracy. But the real question is, who should be the one to remedy or bridge the gap between this problem?
We need competition in a society for capitalism to really work. If you don't have competition, then it breaks down. And so that's one institution. I mean, the whole issue of how we regulate labor and what are standards for labor. And so part of the answer here is, I think, a set of rules. Part of the solution actually can come from within, from business itself. So a perfect example would be training. So we have a lot of companies in America that used to train. They used to have a lot of training because virtually most of their employees were full-time workers, and those workers were, the expectation was those workers are going to work in the company for some time, so companies invested heavily in training. And what's happened is, we have more outsourcing. We have to deal with certain labor standards. People invented this whole idea of part-time workers. So now we have part-time workers that have different rules than full-time workers. If you have a part-time worker, companies say, well, gee, I don't want to really train them. So the training investment of companies in America has just been going down and down and down. And as a result, they're sacrificing, productivity and efficiency in their businesses. But ultimately, it was a bad choice in the sense it wasn't actually efficient. It seemed like an efficiency, but it really wasn't, because the long-term effect of not having these skilled workers was worse. And
as I understand it, there is this problem of irregular workers representing a greater and greater share of the labor force, lacking basic protections and being paid less and trained less. Now, I imagine that from the company's point of view, the company will say, it's rational for us to do this. It makes sense that because we lack flexibility in the labor market, our only alternative is to hire irregular workers. If that's at least part of the problem, it seems to me that one of the solutions would be to have a public conversation about work, about the terms of work, to overcome the problem of irregular workers, maybe to increase flexibility in certain ways in the labor contracts and regulations for the regular workers, to include in that discussion the companies, the government, and also the labor unions, so that everyone can have a voice in renegotiating the terms of labor and the terms of work. Well, it requires a kind, I think what you're suggesting, it requires a kind of civic conversation and debate, and there will be competing points of view. But I think it matters that all voices be represented and that it be seen in this larger context, not just of how do we get, how do we maximize profits or get a bigger share, but what does justice in work look like?
It seems to me that CSV is a kind of device for the companies, for the firms, which is at least a part of the current crisis of the capitalism, take care of the problem themselves.
Right.
Yes.
Right.
And do you think this will be enough to solve this problem?
Will it be enough? Well, because what he is offering is an account of how business can be better at doing what it does by having a larger social vision. So I I very much like the shared value approach that Michael has described. And I think it could be a great start on the path. That would be a great thing. Now, is it enough? No, I don't think so for the following reason. I think that we are not only consumers and economic creatures. We are also citizens and human beings that aspire not only to material prosperity and abundance, but also to a good and meaningful life. And as individuals, but also collectively. And that requires democratic politics. It requires civic education. It requires building up the civic culture and strengthening the ties of family and community that are sometimes eroded by capitalism. Not the enlightened, more imaginative shared value capitalism Michael is describing, but standard profit-driven short-term capitalism can be corrosive of community. I think maybe one of the reasons, going back to the workers, one of the reasons that conversation would be difficult is that so much rests on what the employer provides the worker for health care, for a pension, as well as an income. And one way of taking some of the pressure off the relation between the company and workers is to strengthen the safety net in the welfare state. And I know in Korea that debate is going on as we speak. Is on the one hand, the need for education, for young people to be able to have access to a good education. And on the other hand, to look after people who've retired and provide a decent pension and a dignified life for people who have spent a lifetime of work is also with the kind of civic conversation and discussion that aims at a new social contract between generations.
But if the remaining problems after CSV takes care of some of the problems with capitalism, and if the government or political system does not adequately take care of this problem, what else?
So I think that this is not something I really spent a lot of time working on historically, but over the last decade or so, I've become seriously concerned about how to get our political systems to actually take on the role that Michael just talked about, and how we could possibly have this kind of discourse. But that said, it raises the stakes of some new business leadership. And my view is, and what my mission has been, for the last 4 or 5 years, is to help us in business understand that the path we're on now is going nowhere. We'll be okay next year and the year after that, but ultimately, if we don't get off this path and onto a better path, then everything that we stand for and believe in about what business contributes to society is going to not ultimately succeed. And so we in business have to re-examine very deeply what we do and the choices we make, and I think that appeal. Some businesses rose to that and donated a lot of money and did a lot of good things. But ultimately, I don't think that appeal will change the direction. The appeal that I would make through the shared value concept is that we actually rethink what capitalism is and how to be good capitalists of the capitalism itself. And so, Professor Cho, again, this is a phenomenally important question of how much can we achieve through that, and what other mechanisms are going to be necessary, and how could we make those other mechanisms work Because we're not having a good public discourse.
Well,
right
so far, I have observed 4 points, in each of which you have agreed. The first one is that perhaps capitalism is one of the greatest and magical, as you said, mechanism to take for us to be economically affluent. But then the second, the rise of big companies may have contributed to the economy of the world, but at the same time it has created some problems. 3, CSV, creating shared value, can solve some of the problems, not everything, of the crisis created by the firms themselves. 4th, that is probably the most dismal and pessimistic agreement that you have. That is, the government is there, but probably the government has not been functioning well enough to take care of the remainders of the problems because of more recently. Then, what is the challenge we have? We cannot simply say that the government is not functioning well and we are in trouble. Then
what?
Then what?
From family to community to neighborhood to schools to religious communities to social movements. This space is, I think, potentially the greatest source of civic education and of a shared moral deliberation that can influence both the way companies operate and the way government operates. Politicians are usually the last to respond to the aspirations of people for a public life of larger meaning and purpose. One of the things that I've learned, and I consider this a great privilege to have learned it when I've visited Korea in recent years and engaged especially with young people, but not only with young people. One thing that strikes me, and it gives me great hope, you were depressed by the earlier part of our conversation. What gives me hope is the hunger, the yearning, the passion to engage in reasoned public discourse on big ethical questions that matter, but to do that in a spirit of mutual respect. That's not an easy thing to do. It's not something that government can achieve through a law or a regulation. It's not something that capitalism, even at its best, and Michael has, I think, a recipe for capitalism at its best. It's not something that either government or capitalism can accomplish. Cultivating that spirit of common purpose and the willingness to reason together, to disagree together in public about big questions, the civic habits and shared ideals that can lift up the terms of public discourse, where we encounter one another and contend with one another and learn how to argue with one another, but also to live with one another and to listen to one another. And that, I think, is the art of civic discourse, and it isn't easy, but it's, I think, one of the most important projects we have.
And indeed, I'm really thankful to both of you. Thank you very much, both Michael.
네, 토론 진행에 수고해주신 조동성 서울대 명예교수님과 패널 여러분께 다시 한번 큰 박수 부탁드립니다.
이번 포럼은 기업과 사회가 왜 서로에게서 점점 멀어지고 있는지, 그리고 그 간격을 좁히기 위해 어떤 해결책이 필요한지에 대해 생각해 볼 수 있는 기회였다. 특히 어떻게 차별화할 것인가라는 주제를 놓고 하버드대 마이클 포터, 마이클 샌델 교수 등 세계적인 경영사상가들이 보여준 현대 자본주의 사회의 본질을 꿰뚫는 날카로운 통찰은 국내 포럼의 수준을 한층 높였다. 대한민국의 새로운 경제도약을 제시한 동아 비즈니스 포럼 2014. 내년을 기약해본다.